Hello, my name is Matt Bennett. Today I'm going to introduce you to some basic techniques in tattooing. My store is Skin Tattoo and Design, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are an award-winning studio and have 11 plus years of experience. Today I'm going to introduce to you how I do tattoos. Just before we get started, I'd like to cap on an important issue with the health department and the legality and rules of tattooing for your particular area. You might want to check into it to see if it's illegal or not legal or what the age limits are. In some areas, if you tattoo minors, it can be a felony, so that's a very important issue that you want to tackle before you start doing tattoos. Now we're going to talk tools. This is what a basic area should look like when you're getting ready to lay a tattoo. You have your tubes, your machines, your disposable setup with your ink lids that you throw out. This is a dental bib right here, has a disposable back. Everything is disposable. It's all plastic lined and you're good to go. You don't need autoclave or any kind of sterilization. This stuff you put together, you throw out. All you need to pick up is a sharps container. You can get that at a local Walgreens or a pharmacy to throw your dirty needles in. The needles come pre-made from companies that we will provide for you at the end of this tape. Also, the disposable tools and all the equipment that we use will be available at the end of this tape through suppliers that we use and recommend. Okay, what we have here are two different styles of machine. One does outline, one does shading. The one that does outline right here is cut back a little bit so that it runs a little bit faster. It delivers a smoother line. The shader runs a little bit slower so you can focus on more detail and not move as fast. Okay, these are tubes. One is a Magnum and one is a liner. The Magnum tube is for shading. The shader needle that I'll be using today is a 7 mag. It has 4 on the bottom and 3 on top. At least that's how it should look when it's sitting in your tube, which I'll explain to you a little bit later. This is the tube. It is a 7 mag tube. It's designed only for this group, and you can't interchange groupings with different size tubes. It has to be specifically made for that needle group. This is a liner. This is, again, a disposable tube, a disposable needle. These are the most important tools you'll use, the round liner and the Magnum needle. Common needle groups are a 5 to 7 mag for shading, and for lining, 5 to 7 liner and a round. You're going to want to pre-order these from a company so that they're tight and they're made proper to get the best tattoo that you possibly can. So remember that quality equipment is where it's at. You can't expect to use something cheap and get a good tattoo out of it, so keep that in mind before you proceed with what you're doing and buying. Another important piece of equipment that I use in my store is this little color changing ultrasonic. It has a foot pedal down here so it avoids you from having to reach up with dirty hands to turn it on and off. This little unit can help you change colors quickly in between doing colors while you're doing a tattoo, which can take a big headache out of your work. The power unit is the heartbeat of your function here in tattooing. Without this thing, you're not doing anything. This power unit right here makes these tattoo machines function. It's your electrical power supply to your machine. From the power unit runs a foot pedal, which is operational just by stepping on it. I use a round foot pedal because I can press on it from any direction to activate my power unit to make my machines run. This is a clip cord. This clips into the back of your machine, delivering electricity to your machine. Let's talk ink. These are pigments that you buy from a reputable supplier. Don't settle for anything less. It's not recommended that you try and mix these on your own. Trust me, ordering them pre-made is the way to go. Certain inks do certain things. You want to always make sure that you're using the right ink for the right job. Again, always order from a reputable supplier. A very important thing that you're going to need to use when you're working is a surface sterilizer spray. This you'll spray on your table or you'll spray on your chair to make sure that the area is clean for your client. Different sprays have different times for setting, so make sure that you read the can or whatever you happen to be using and make sure you follow the directions so it is effective. This is a tracing, or what is called a line drawing, of the dragon that we're going to be using today for this tattoo. To create a stencil, you're going to use Thermofax paper, which is the most commonly used method of stenciling and tattooing. The way you do this is in Thermofax paper, there's a piece of onion sheet. You want to remove that and discard this piece. With your design, you want to lay it on top of the paper, tape it down firmly on each end, and trace it with something like a dull pencil. Anything sharp will rip through and ruin your design. If you don't tape it down, you can mess your design up underneath if you slip. So just keep that in mind before you stencil. When you're done with the tracing, you can cut it out and you're ready to apply. Now we're going to assemble our outliner machine. This is our machine that runs a little bit faster than our shader. This is the machine we need to start our process. Now we're going to grab our needle, which is our outliner needle. It's attached to a bar pre-made, ready to go. We're going to load it in through the top, through the quick chuck part of the machine. Most quality machines have these features on them. Then we're going to take our tube. Going to load the tube up through the bottom, let the needle drop in, push the tube up in the assembly, balance it out so you can grab the quick change chuck and snug it. Now you can attach the bar to the nipple. On most tattoo machines and setups, the bar opening faces to the left when the machine is looking at you. That ensures that the needle group rides on the bottom of the tube, which you need to get the precise detail out of the tattoo that you need to get. Some of the bars don't fit the nipples the way they're supposed to, so have a little pliers on hand to open the tip of the loop up and just set it in place. Rubber bands are designed to pull your bar down against the tube so that there's no floppy fluctuation in there when you're trying to get precise detail. And always make sure you go back to the top and pinch that down tight so there's no sloppiness happening when it's tapping up and down. Again, this feature is similar to a doorbell. It's electromagnetic with springs, electric coils, and a power supply coming in through the back. As power is delivered through the back, it activates the coils and causes this bar to go up and down, which creates the puncturing technique of the tattoo. As we set our depth, you need to hold the machine up and look at it carefully. Extend it out as far as the tube will push in. So push the tube up until it stops, about where it stops. Then you're going to hold the machine right at you, turn it up, grab the tip of the needle, and just tweak it back. In the tattoo business, it's called tweaking. You don't really want to bend it. You just want it to gently rest up against the back of the tube. So again, you get the precision you need to lay the piece. So now, depth, we're going to go about 1/8 of an inch. For beginners, you're going to want to work off the tube, which means you're not going to work off the tip of the needle. I'll go into that when we start our outline. So right now, we're set at about 1/8 of an inch. Before I do anything else, I'm going to lock this quick chuck here. Now, as I set the machine, I make sure that I reach down with my middle finger and push this bar down. So that shows me exactly what my depth is going to be. Now, sometimes during the piece, you can get fluctuations in the top here or through the tube that might slip in the machine that might create a depth difference, which is important. You need to keep an eye on that as you're working. You don't want to penetrate too deeply. Now we're going to talk stencil application and how we proceed to get this image onto the skin. There's several different methods of doing this. The most common way is using soap to apply to the skin and rub and get to a sticky form to make the ink transfer from this paper. Another way of doing it is a Speed brand Speed Stick. You have to be careful though. Some health departments don't allow you reusing them, or they recommend that you shave them in between clients. So this method I'm going to show you is going to be with green soap. It is a soap that's used in tattooing, commonly used to clean skin before prepping and while laying a tattoo. These sports bottles are also recommended as they reduce the amount of overspray on the area to keep your area more clean, which is very important. Okay. We're going to spray down a towel. We recommend the use of Bounty towels because they leave less debris behind and don't get caught up in your needles. So you can experiment with different towels that you want to use, but again, the Bounty brands seem to be the best, and that's what we work with. Okay, Going to the skin. This is a foot tattoo, so we're going to clean the top of the foot. Okay, this disinfects and preps us for our stencil. So right now, the foot is moist. It's ready for our stencil. We're going to take the stencil, bring it over to the foot. Placement is crucial when you lay a tattoo. It makes or breaks the piece itself, so always make sure that you absolutely take your time to lay the stencil correctly and make sure that it's centered in whatever muscle group that you happen to be working with. Common stencil applications are done with people standing up so that when they're viewed in a normal relaxed position, their tattoos look right. So now what we do with this, make sure all the edges are down, press it all the way around. As you press it down, you can see the stencil kind of absorb the soap and the ink kind of fatten up a little bit in the paper. Now we're ready to peel it off. And boom, there we go, we're ready to go. Now we're going to start with our outline. First we're going to plug our machine in, and you'll grab your plug. The way you hook this particular machine up is insert the bottom, and it's spring-loaded and holds and just inserts in the top. Now you're ready to go. You want to step on your foot pedal, make sure that you're at the right speed. You don't want your machine to sound sloppy or sputtery, and you don't want it to sound too soft like this. You want it to sound nice and crisp and clean without a lot of rattle going on, and you'll do that through your adjustment on your rheostat with your power unit. Now we're going to set our machine down and we're going to pour our pigment. Right now we're just using a standard black. This is just designed for outlining. Getting ready to outline. You hold the machine similar to a pencil. Fat grips help accommodate the weight of the machine, and if you're working for a long period of time, it helps to balance and make things feel much better. So you want to grip it like a pencil and get ready to dip in your pigment. When you dip, you don't want to run your machine inside the cap, as you can tap the bottom of the lid and dull your needles, making it painful on your customer and taking away the preciseness that you need. Now you want to run your machine before you do anything and kind of hold it over your area and move it around, making sure that there's no spray or anything coming out of it that could disrupt the view that you need. As long as you don't see any spots or anything flying out of the tip of your machine, you're ready to go. So the first thing you want to do is blot the tip of your machine off. Get that excess pigment off there so you can see where you're going. Next, you want to use your ring finger to scoop up a little petroleum jelly. Apply just a little bit to the stencil right here. What this does, as it causes the pigment to bubble up on the skin and go back up into the tube instead of spreading all over the place. Before we actually start our outline, you're going to want to grab a paper towel and put it in your left hand if you're a right-handed person. If you're a left-handed person, you will go with left-handed machines, and make sure you check that out if that's an issue with you. When you start to tattoo, you have to stretch the skin in order for the needles to penetrate and make a mark. If you don't stretch the skin, the needles will bounce off and you'll have kind of a hazy, powdery image. That's not what you're going to be looking for. So when you get in here, again, dip, make sure you're cleaned up, ready to go, got your Vaseline, come down on the tattoo. Use part of this hand to stretch, the other part of this hand to stretch, and keep the towel balled up in your fingers back here. You'll be moving it around and placing it how you need to place it to make it work. So again, we're coming in. We're going to place a little Vaseline down here, and we're going to start our machine. Now we're going to go to lay our first line. As you lay the line, don't be scared. Try to think confident when you get in there. Hold it as steady as you can, approach the skin, and lay your first line. Go very slow, and watch what you're doing. Again, if you have the Vaseline down, you should be able to get the detail that you need and be able to see exactly what you're doing. There we have 2 lines. I'm going to wipe down and take a look at them. And those are what they are. Those outlines are done with a 7-round needle. As you're working with your stencil, sometimes the stencils can get placed so dark that it's actually hard to see the outline that you're laying. So if you've let the stencil sit there for a little while, it can actually become pretty permanent in there and allow you to erase a little bit without totally losing the image, so you can see what you're doing a little better. So what you'll do is spray down your towel, start at the top with one smooth, firm wipe, and if you didn't take enough off the first time, do it again. And that looks pretty good, so where you can see our black in there a little bit better amongst the purple stencil. Now we're going to get back in and continue what we were doing. Dip. Try not to run your machine down in the lid again as you can dull the needles. As time progresses, you get more experienced, you can run them in there, but just for now, try not to do that. Back to the outline. Coming back in here with confidence, wiping off the tip. Run your machine before you set it down, and set it down and start to move. Always take a short patch, blot off or wipe gently to see what you've just laid to make sure that everything is going smoothly. If it's not going smoothly, start back up with how you set your machine up again. Look at it and make sure that everything is functional. Okay. Going to keep moving along here. Again, I'm putting down my petroleum. I always do that. And we'll just keep moving along with this outline. Again, be careful as you wipe. You can tend to erase a little bit too much stencil, and then you might have a problem with where you're going. Although if you're a good artist and you have a pen handy, you can always fill that back in and go from there. As you're moving along, if you have tendency to shake a little, that's okay. It is just an outline. It is a preliminary part of your tattoo. And in most cases, you can go back over with your shader and fix anything that you might have done wrong. As you approach your outline, if you're not very sure, always move slow and make sure that the permanent image that you're laying is laid in right. As you can see, when I'm moving along here, the Vaseline seems to tuck the ink back up inside the tube instead of spreading all over the place, which would make it nearly impossible for me to see what I was doing. We got nice, clean, black outlines going on there. Always make sure that you try to get your points in there. That's very important that the lines meet the way they're supposed to. And you shouldn't have a problem doing that if everything's running good and you're using your petroleum jelly. We'll keep moving along here. Outlining the claw of our dragon. And if there's an area that was a little bit light or you weren't quite happy with it, just go back over it and fix it and make it look good. You can't expect to lay a perfect outline your first time. It's never going to happen. But with these tips, hopefully you can get a better one than you would have normally. We're moving back in here. Again, blotting off our machine, taking off the excess. Have our petroleum down. We're stretching with both hands. We're coming in gently, being confident. Always be serious and focus and think about what you're doing, not about anything else that's happening in the room. When you're laying a tattoo on certain areas, you also might want to consider the hygiene of the client and the person that you're working with. After doing this 11 years and seeing hundreds of feet up in my face, I now don't have a problem to tell them to take care of that before we get started, or we'll secure the area so it's not torturing us as we're working. The more confident you are about the whole thing, the better it will turn out. It always helps to be an artist and have an eye for art in the beginning, so you can kind of have a better oversight on what you're doing. Not being able to draw and trying to tattoo, well, people do it all the time. The fact is, if you don't know how to draw and you're trying to tattoo, or airbrush or anything else for that matter, things are going to be much more difficult. As you're laying the line, you want to make sure that you don't go too deep. So make sure that you don't press too hard when you're actually doing it. When you take the swipe, you'll move in, set it down in there, stop and take a look. Make sure that you're not in too deep. If you are in too deep, you can get machine sputtering problems, or you'll notice kind of a trench cut effect in the skin where you'll have little knots on the sides of the lines. In tattooing, that's called a line blowout, and that shows that you're a true beginner. So we want to try to avoid that. Well, we're doing the horns and the head right now. And we're moving slower just for the videotape. This normal outline would probably take a skilled artist about 15 or 20 minutes. Again, we're moving through. Making sure that we're all stretched out so that our skin is taking the pigment the way we want it to. Pigment, again, is very important. If you think that you don't have the right pigment, you're using something too thick or too thin, it's going to show and your work is not going to look right. So always make sure. But if you're doing an outline, you're doing a standard tattoo outline, make sure that you have a standard ink for tattooing an outline in the skin. And make sure that you're not using a tribal black or a gray shading ink or something like that. Always make sure when you're doing a tattoo that you have a good source of lighting too. So that always helps. Fluorescent is not recommended. The flickering can cause problems in your vision if you're trying to see what you're doing. Outline through these little tattoos is pretty standard. You use the same procedure through every one. There's nothing different. For all the little hearts and the little roses and little dragons and suns, the way I'm outlining this tattoo is exactly the way you'll outline everything just like that. It is very common to get clients that can't hold still, and that can really make it difficult for you to lay a tattoo. So when you're actually working on the person, try to calm them down, keep them breathing, and try to make your job as easy as possible. There's nothing more frustrating than having a client that can't sit still, and it causes poor reflection in your work and poor reflection on you when other people look at that work and know that you did it. So all those little things come into play when you're trying to lay a good solid piece. And fortunately, my client is holding very still. Always moving slowly and cautiously. If we could erase, it would not be a big deal. But unfortunately, we can't. We'll wipe down, take a look, make sure we got a clean one there. When you're actually doing a tattoo and you're tracing the outline into the stencil, I've heard some beginners suggest that you should tattoo on either side of the line. If you're working with some technical patterns, that might be the case, but 9 times out of 10, when you stick that stencil down, you trace your tattoo line directly over the purple ink that's on there, or whatever you happen to be working over, if it's a ballpoint pen or another type of stencil. Don't be afraid when you're moving in on a tattoo and you get the butterflies. It's normal. Everybody gets it. You're laying something permanent and you don't want to mess it up. So that's good reason to be nervous right there. Although don't let your nerves take control of what you're trying to do. So try to place your focus on the machine and on the project at hand. And if you got to stop and breathe and relax, then stop and breathe and relax, because the client will be happy that you're taking your time to lay the best piece that you possibly can. 9 out of 10 tattoos are laid with a stencil. It's very rare that people go in and work freehand with pieces unless there's other existing tattoos or they're doing huge stuff and they want to execute a freehand piece. Most famous artists in the world all work with stencils, so that's just how it goes. Now, we're going to dip our machine into our ultrasonic over here, running it, stepping on our pedal and activating it. We drop our machine down into our little ultrasonic. And if you guys ain't got one of these, just a plain old wash cup of water will do almost as good of a job, but not quite the same thing. These little ultrasonics do work really good, so just still running it. We'll pull it out and take a look. And as you can see, before I even wipe the machine, it's pretty clean. So now we'll set the machine down in a nice clean area. And we'll grab our bottle, which has been bagged. Make sure that everything's clean so we don't get cross-contamination happening. It's a big factor amongst beginners, and you don't want that happening because spreading disease is not a good thing. So we clean down, wipe really good, get a good look at what we're doing. That looks nice and clean. We're going to wipe down again. Now we're going to take our gloves off. Latex permeates and becomes bad every 15 to 20 minutes, so you want to make sure that you change your gloves every 15 or 20 minutes depending on the ply from the factory. Obviously, the thicker the glove, the longer it'll last, but you don't want to take the chance, so gloves are cheap, change them and do it just like that. So now what we're going to do is grab our little pen. We've wiped our area down with green soap, and now we're going to draw on this little tail piece right here. So we get the ball rolling here on the pen and just kind of come in and draw a little tail piece in here. Nothing too big and gaudy. I want to keep her foot looking pretty. And just lightly rough something in like that. And before we do anything again, grab another pair of gloves. As time goes by, you'll find the powder-free ones are the way to go. Powder can tend to irritate your hands, cause itching and redness problems. Okay, now that we have our tail drawn in place here, as you can see, I pushed the toes down to stretch it out to make it flat for myself and see where I'm going. Now we're ready to tattoo again. So we dip our machine, or first blot it off on the tissue, make sure that all the water from your ultrasonic is out of the tip. So when you go to dip, that you get fresh, clean, concentrated black ink and no water mix in there. Now we're going to get into shading. First we're going to stop on our pedal and make sure that our machine runs the way we want it to. It sounds a little loud, a little sloppy, so we're going to turn it down a little bit, get more of a smoother running, more controllable effect. And again, we're going to check the tip of our needles and make sure that we're coming out approximately where we want to be coming out. And look at it right in the front too to make sure that there is not much gap, if any, in between the bottom needles and the bottom of the tube right here. Again, we're getting ready to start shading. Already having switched to my shader machine, the setup being the same as the outliner, we're pretty much ready to roll. So today we're going to work with straight black as we approach our shading. And I'll get started here. First, we're going to dip in to our black, stir it up a little bit again. We're using the same black that we used to outline with. We're getting the petroleum on our finger again, got our towel in hand, and we're ready to go. Okay, now we're getting up on the skin. We're going to put our petroleum down and then blot the tip of our needle off again so we can see where we're going. Now we're going to start shading. Again, as you approach the skin, be very steady and watch closely to what's happening. Kind of move along gently and take time to stop and notice what your machine is doing. I'm going to keep moving along here just a little bit so that you can see what this looks like as I finish a piece. And see what shading does to actually enhance the dragon itself here. When you do shading, you can move your machine however you want. If you're going for a more even patch though, it's very customary to operate your machine in little small circles when you're shading, or even if you're doing solid color work, which you'll see here shortly. Again, we're going to dip, go back in, start shading some more. This is called a whip style shading, where it's actually pulled along. Just another technique of applying black. And again, take your time, make sure that it's going where you want it to go. There's no need to rush. If you're rushing, you probably shouldn't be holding a tattoo machine. Now again, I'm moving up the body here just a little bit, creating some shading to show that there's a difference between the level in the head and the neck. And we're being very gentle about it. We're not pushing down in here. We're letting the machine do the work. All you want to do is hold the machine in place and just let it do the work for you. You'll feel the machine's needles puncture in there. You'll get used to how that feels as you're moving along, and eventually know exactly what your machine's doing when it's doing it and not be at question on anything you're doing. So I'm just moving along through here with my 7 mag shader, bringing out some details in the dragon. I'm going to round off a little muscle tone back here to show some little bicep and shoulder action in the dragon. Show some curvature in there. Again, we're using a straight black. It's not a tribal black or a shading black, just a straight up line in black. And again, you can buy all those supplies from the people we'll recommend to you at the end of this tape. And we're coming along through here, kind of creating a little bit of line elimination. It's common on a lot of pieces to run your shader up against the outline to kind of get rid of it and create more of a realistic effect. Your shader is a very functional tool. You can thicken lines, place shade marks where there might be a blowout in a line. You can use it for a lot of things. You know, as you're working along, people will ask you if you ever make mistakes, and it's, well, you probably do, but you fix them right as you're moving along. So it's kind of like building something. You have to do it step by step, and just take your time and do it the best you can. Get a little texture down around the wing here. And remember not to go overboard with the black, because you can always add it, but you can't take it away. Now, had this person specified to me that they wanted a black and gray piece, I would get a little bit more extensive with the shading to accommodate the lack of color. So since that's not the case in this one, and we are doing color, we're not going to go quite as heavy with the black and gray and save more room for our color shading. When you use black and gray, if you're using all your needle tips, the pigment is usually so strong that you hardly have to touch the skin to get it to go in. The color is a little bit different, and we'll see how that works in just a minute. We approach the end of this piece in black and gray. There we go. Back to the ultrasonic for a rinse. Get all of our black out of there so it doesn't contaminate our fresh color. And let the ultrasonic clean just for a second. That is to your benefit. And you'll see that as you get to changing colors along the way. Okay, set her back down. Reach for a towel, grab our bagged bottle, spray our cloth down, and wipe away. There we have a black tattoo. Looks nice and clean. That's good to go and ready for color. Again, we have our towel in hand. We're going to blot our machine off and make sure that there's no excess water left in there to contaminate our pigment and water it down, because that's not what we want. Then we're going to reach over here, turn our machine up just a little bit. As you start to working with your machine, you can start to see it slow down as time progresses with the tattoo, as pigment will get bound up in the tip and start to actually slow the machine down. So as that happens, you want to make sure that you keep it as clean as possible. And if you can't keep it that clean, turn your volume up a little bit. A little extra power will bring you right back up to where you need to be. And we're going to work from dark to light. In tattooing, the theory is working from dark to light. So say if I were to start my white pigment in this tattoo, and then I were to go to add blue, my fresh, crisp white would turn out to be a light blue. So we always want to make sure that we work from dark to light. Now, as you get to more technical parts of tattoos, you can do techniques called staining, where you can actually rub in darker pigments into lighter ones without even tattooing them. But again, we won't be getting into that. We'll be sticking to the basics here. Moving along, we're going to dip into our blue. Make sure we got a nice, smooth, consistent, creamy blue. We don't want anything too chunky or too watery. Go for our petroleum. Wipe down again. Now we're going to blot the needle off, make sure we can see where we're going. And now we're going to start laying blue, shading similar to the way that we laid the black. As we're laying the color over the black, don't be afraid to go over the top of the black with it. The black is an accent that'll make the existing color look like a darker shade, which actually works out really cool when you're moving along. Again, don't press too hard. You want just light shades in the beginning. You don't want anything in there too thick right off the bat. You'd rather start out light and wispy and gradually build, because you can't change them when they're finished. So you can see the blue starting to move in there nice and smooth. We're not putting too much in. We're keeping it nice and clean. Again, keep your picture handy so you can refer to what you're doing. You'll see me looking off to the side here frequently to see exactly where my blue is supposed to go. Now, if you drew the picture up yourself and you colored it or painted it yourself, then you're probably not going to have to reference back to a sheet. But in most cases, you're working with other people's artwork, and you are going to have to look at how they did it to be able to duplicate it. Some machines are actually set up that when you sink all the needles down in, that you'll get a bog, kind of like that. And that's normal. Don't be shocked by that. Some people will say, oh, you're going too deep, or you're doing this and that. Some machines in the spring setups are built different ways, and when you sink them in and all the needles go in, hearing a dulled out noise is not uncommon. But if it's not producing the right effect for you, make sure that you have the desired level on your power unit to get the effect you need to get. So I'm lightly shading blue over the black here. Again, not doing it heavily because we need to save room for our white and green. And we're getting a really cool effect going on here. It almost creates kind of an airbrushed effect. The needles leave little tiny dots in there that you'll notice as you start working. And it almost looks like kind of a stippling effect from an airbrush. Whenever you're doing a tattoo and you're working with someone, working with a client, and you're not sure about something that you're doing, you're not quite sure about the technique, or you're not quite sure if you can pull it off, you need to always make sure to let them know ahead of time what they're in for, and the fact that you might not be able to do something is going to be important to them, because in the end, if they have an eye for art and they see that you missed something, it's not going to be good, and it's really important that you lay things out on the line prior, because if you steer somebody wrong, they're not going to come back. And one good tattoo tells 2 people, one bad one tells 50, so you need to keep that in mind. So now we're done with our blue. Going back here to clean our machine out, dipping it in our little ultrasonic here. And it's not going to be too crucial if the blues and greens mix, but we do want to keep them as separate as possible to get the clearest effect possible. We're taking a little bit of Vaseline here, rubbing the whole thing down just to kind of keep the skin conditioned in there and keep it all pliable and moist. You don't really want anything drying out or getting crusty or nasty on you when you're working. Going through a lot of paper towels is a normal thing. And now we're ready to start laying green. Our nice lime green here. It's going to mix well with this country blue. And now we're going to get started. Start back over here on one of the wings. Got a nice bright color there. I'll wipe away, see if that took. And it looks like it's taken pretty good. I'll just kind of keep moving along here, shading gently. So again, you can't take color back, but you can always add. Machine control is crucial when you're laying a piece. The control of the machine and how it functions and everything is the heart of what's going to happen. Your tools are what you do. And again, if you buy some cheap stuff, you're going to have nothing but a headache. The more that you spend, or the more that you can spend on your equipment, the more it shows in the end. The better things are set up. The difference between a machine that's pricey and nice versus a cheap little crappy one is having one sent to you completely set up and ready to purr like a kitten versus one that you need to perform rocket science on to get running. And if you don't know a lot about machines, you don't want to work with a bad one. And we're moving along here. As you'll notice me doing little circular patterns here. That gives me more of an even tone coverage. It spreads the color more evenly than just moving straight. If you move straight, you'll see the machine laying 4 little lines. If you're working with a 7 mag, which is what we're working with now, those 4 little lines are the 4 needles that run on the bottom of the tube. And since you usually approach the skin at a slight angle, the top 3 needles usually don't touch right away unless you push down in. So, moving along here, throwing some more green in place here. Everything's looking really nice and bright so far. You never want to throw stuff in too dark. You look up here, you'll notice that I ran color right up against color there. That creates kind of a dark effect. You want to stay away from that. This particular piece, you want to leave a little gap in between the colors so we have some airway happening there and things don't look so clogged. And if you're never sure about the piece you're doing, break out your set of colored pencils and do a trial run on paper first. Might sound like a lot of work, but it's a lot bigger headache dealing with a customer that's not happy. And we're coming around the back here. Laying some lime green in here. Moving along some side motions here, making sure we don't overthrow the line there. And again, if you do go over the line a little bit, stop what you're doing, don't get frustrated. And if there's no way that you think you can fix it, set everything down, clean your tattoo up, readjust your machine, and start over again. Don't get mad and throw things around. It's never going to get your job done. Working our way down towards the bottom of the tail. And probably from the view that you're getting, it looks really blurred and green. But when you're actually up on top of it and you're using your petroleum the way you should and you're blotting off the skin and the needle tip the way you should and everything's running good, you can see where you're going pretty easy. In a minute here, we will be going to white, which will be our next color. We'll explain a little bit about white when we're in there. A lot of misconceptions about that color. And in all actuality, it's a pigment just like the rest of them, and it goes in just the same way if it's applied right. So, contrary to beginner popular belief, white is not a bad color. It's an awesome color. Takes just like the rest of the pigments. If you know how to apply them, it'll be a normal part of your regular coloring process. Again, people do different styles. The way you shade and color your tattoos is going to be your style and technique, and in the end, that's what's going to set you apart and how people are going to be able to distinguish who's who when they're looking at tattoos. And in the business, if you know a lot about tattoos and you know a lot of people and their style, you can pretty much look at anything famous and get a good idea of who did it or what kind of style it came from. Again, we're nearing the end here of the green, so I'm cleaning out my machine. Getting ready to wipe it down a little bit before I set it down. Then we're going to grab our spray bottle again. Spray the towel down And wipe the tattoo off nice and clean, so we can see exactly what's happening in there. Getting ready to dip our machine in, which has been cleaned again in our little ultrasonic, into our white. Dipping it on in there. Remember, if you pour colors too soon, they can have tendency to dry out while you're doing other things. So if you don't have huge color bottles and color to waste, you might want to wait and pour them as you go. But again, always make sure that you deglove. Don't grab your bottles or anything with dirty gloves or anything that's not bagged and ready for you to grab. So here we go. Going to throw some white down in the wing here so you can see how that takes. White is an amazing color. When I first started tattooing, I had a problem with getting some whites in because I didn't really have my technique down of color implantation, basically shading and coloring. But the more you get that down, obviously, the cooler you can blend and make stuff look. I'm going to come up to the top here, lay our needles down, and just kind of slide them across that line there, creating a little bit of a highlight effect. You'll find that moving your machine around in little circles and stuff versus taking long strokes is going to be better for you than trying to take the long strokes and trying to make it go quicker than it should. Still working on the wing here. And you'll notice in the beginning that I introduced the use of disposable tubes, which is cool. If you're a beginner, that's what you should use if you don't have autoclave sterilization. But when you're a professional, you do a lot of tattoos, these stainless grips are the way to go. Nothing else beats them. If you're on the road, you're doing some small tattoos, you don't want to carry your gear with you, it's disposable setup with plastic tubes rocks. There's nothing like it. Again, you'll see me rinsing my machine here because some of the older pigments will stain inside the tube, even with my little ultrasonic here. And I'll have to kind of slip back in there and rinse out periodically as I see my crisp white turning to a dingy gray. Moving through there, you can actually see it go in, which is very cool. Now, for a lot of beginners out there, that putting in white and colors in general is not easy. The darker colors seem to go in a little bit better because they're darker and they show up easier, but again, the application is the same for every pigment, every ink, and you just want to use that same technique all the way through, and you shouldn't have any problems. You always want to make sure that you don't spend too much time in one area, because you can chew the skin up and kind of get a nasty effect there, which might cause scar tissue, and that's definitely, again, what you don't want. You want to get in there and get out. You can hit an area in the skin up to about 3 times. After that, you want to stay out of it. If you haven't gotten your effect in after the 3rd pass, then you're going to want to let it heal and go back in and try to get that effect later instead of chancing scar tissue, which is pretty much irreversible and one of the biggest no-nos in tattooing. Not to mention it gets a little expensive when everybody's going to somebody else because you're not putting it in right. Working my way through. Seems that the green pigment and blue pigment in this tube are not going to go away for us today, which is fine. We'll just keep rinsing here to get the crisp, clear whites that we need. Always making sure that you're draining the tip inside your napkin there, blotting it off so you don't have a lot of water mixing with your pigment, because that can kind of screw you up too. Moving along through here. Getting heavy with the white is okay because it's white. You put a little bit too much somewhere, you can always darken that up. So you can just kind of cruise along and lay this stuff wherever you want to. Placing it in your highlighted areas. Working with your little imaginary light source. And white is a thicker pigment. It can tend to smear a lot, which makes it kind of hard to see as you're working along. But that's okay. Again, you'll get used to that. Sometimes you'll be running through an area where there is a big puddle of ink down, and people will ask, how can you see where you're going? How do you know what you're doing? Well, pretty much as you start working and start moving along, it almost becomes kind of an instinct where you know that your needles are flying down into the skin. Even if there is a big pile of ink there and you can't really see them, you just know where they're going just by the placement of your machine and how you're putting the stuff in. As you'll see me working along here, you'll notice that the machine is starting to bog out. And we're getting an accumulation of pigment in the tip. And I need to put it in that solidly to actually get the effect I want. So constantly you'll see me meticulously wiping away and looking at what I'm doing to make sure that we're not overdoing it or underdoing it. We want to make it just right. Some highlights down here around the tail. You can see them shoot in there all nice. You overlap white over colors, or you use white to overlap colors. It creates a nice, really smoothed out effect. You take white and tattoo over another color and it just kind of lightens up that color, kind of similar to the way you would take a color and tattoo it over black. It subtly changes the color that's over the top or underneath. So you can't actually mix colors inside the skin before mixing them in a cap. You just got to be careful with what you're doing. Moving through the body here to show some highlights there. Got our little foot twitch in here, which is okay. Just apply a little bit more pressure with your hands and try to hold them down, but don't hurt them. Seen a lot of tattooists work and actually leave bruises where they place their hands. And that's just from squeezing the client and trying to stretch the skin and hold them in place. Now, those are some extreme cases. You don't want to be pressing on people that hard. You just need to stabilize them so you can get your job done. And the quicker you do that, the quicker you get paid, the quicker they're out of pain, and everybody's happy. But also keep in mind as you're moving through that it is your piece, and it's up to you to make it look good. So if they're screaming and trying to rush you and you're not ready to finish, then postpone it and finish it at a later date. Because permanency is not worth somebody's impatience. And always just try to be as meticulous and as clean as about everything that you're doing. When somebody walks into your area and it looks dirty and nasty, they get leery because they think that that's what their tattoo is going to turn out to be, kind of nasty and dirty. So appearance is everything. It goes from you right to your area. So keep in mind with everything that you're doing that people are really paying attention to what you're doing, and just be aware of that. So we're rubbing this in again. We pretty much have a finished piece there. And that's our dragon. We've just witnessed some common techniques in professional tattooing and in beginning tattooing. The techniques that you've witnessed here today, you'll be able to use on through your whole career. They are common, everyday techniques that you'll see in everyday professional tattooing. Again, the main thing that we stress is to use professional top-grade equipment. If you use cheap equipment, you get cheap results. And again, whenever you're approaching things, remain calm, take things in perspective, and just do the best job that you possibly can. I hope that what you've just seen here helps you to progress with what you're trying to do in your tattoo career. Again, this is Matt Bennett, and good luck tattooing.